working on your white paper. Now you might just be getting started and furiously searching for dozens of potential sources, or maybe you're farther along into drafting sections and you're realizing that you need something else, like a source that's specific, or answers a new question you have, or maybe sources that are in conversation with each other. In this video, we're going to talk about sleuthing your sources, which can be a great research technique at any point in your white paper process. It starts when you found a promising source that mentions your problem and you want to find more information. As you're watching this video, you've probably used the searching techniques that you practiced in Unit 1, and maybe also the skills you learned in English 1001, and you've got a great potential source. Your starting point source might be a traditional scholarly publication, or mainstream news piece, or a social media post, maybe even something visual or multimodal. We're going to look at how we can use a starting point source to find more sources or dig deeper into the thread of the discourse. How do we get to the bottom of the information we see presented in an online source? Where can we get answers to our remaining questions? And how can we really max out our sources? By that I mean, how can we use them to lead us to the maximum amount of information we can find on our problem? These are the questions we're going to tackle. So let's start with online text sources. Often online sources employ linkable references. Have you ever noticed all the linked content in many online news pieces? These links allow you to connect to additional information that the author feels is related to the content of their piece. So the links can help you be a sort of detective on the source itself, because you can find additional related sources, or you can dig down to figure out where this particular thread of the conversation began. So let's take a look at how this works. Let's start with this retweet of a New York Times article. Our problem will be student loan debt in higher education. From the tweet, we can view and read the article. Here's an interesting part. Notice the highlighted text is a hyperlink, and the sentence mentions new data and what it might suggest about the problem of student debt and higher education costs. But what is this new data? We're going to look for a foundational source that can help explain why this author thinks the problem arose, or how a particular solution would be effective. That link, when we click on it, takes us to yet another New York Times article, reminding us that this publication has covered this topic before. But this second New York Times article does detail specific research coming out of Stanford University on the topic. That's the new data. So great, can we find the actual analysis that presents this new data? The link takes us to the Brookings Institute website, where we can see that the conference paper is available for download. Notice the authors and publication date match the reference in the New York Times article we were just looking at. This conference paper is where the new data was originally presented, so it's foundational for the New York Times article and the tweet where we started. This new data is the start of a new thread in the discourse about student loan debt. At this point, we may want to perform an author search on Looney and Yanellis for yet more of their research. If this conference paper is important to our explanation of the problem or our solution, then perhaps something else these authors have written would also contribute well to our white paper. One tool at your disposal for this kind of search is Google Scholar. We wouldn't recommend this as a go-to place for all searches, but it can be very helpful for finding lots of works by a known author. Be careful to make sure you've found the right person, though. Let's look at Konstantin Yanellis here. Here we go. He's from Stanford, and all of his listings seem to be in the area related to economics, including the actual Brookings Institute paper we were coming from, so it looks like we have the right guy. If we're still adding potential sources for our white paper, this Yanellis article that appears to discuss the problem of costs for higher education might be worth looking at. If we're on campus or logged into the library servers, we may see direct links to full text of the article that we would not see otherwise. You can use the direct link to the publisher or the Find It at MU link to navigate to the full article. You won't always have linked content, though, to lead you back to foundational sources. For instance, we can see that this article is a PDF. If we want to follow up on this reference in Yanellis' article, we have to turn to the references list and look it up separately. This is when having access to the university's library catalog really comes in handy. The best way to find a specific source that you already know exists is to search the library catalog, MARCAT, looking for the title of the journal, not the article title. We may have to navigate to the specific issue that includes the article we're looking for. Okay, deep breath. That was a lot. Enjoy this kitten. Now, not all of your sources will be or should be scholarly. We want to be engaging in media outside of print and from experts outside the academy. So let's move over to the wonderful world of online video. There are many types of non-textual or multimodal sources you might encounter as you research your problem and solutions. Some of them might be familiar and formal, like full-length documentaries, but there are also many shorter and less formal types of images and multimedia sources that you might use. In order to achieve their intended effects, many of these kinds of sources use evidence to create narratives, but they do not always emphasize or obviously acknowledge their sources. It's an accepted convention of the format. It's not a priority to insert citations when they might interrupt the flow of the media. So here's a short, fun, informational video on our topic. This MTV series presents various kinds of experts commenting on issues that are hot topics in society.
College debt. Currently, around 40 million Americans owe about $1.2 trillion in student loan debt.
Let's stop there. The video tossed out this data as if it's fact, but can we verify it? Where did those numbers come from? How do we know this? In order to find this statistic, two librarians searched studentloans.gov, the Department of Education's Condition of Education Report, consumerfinance.gov, MarketWatch, Business Insider, the National Center for Educational Statistics, and finally found the information at the Federal Reserve's G19 Current Report. And we're pretty confident that that's the official document for reporting it. Ta-da! It's true, that searching really took some effort. Finding foundational information can be hard, sometimes really hard. So why bother with all the effort? Well, at some points when you're writing your white paper, you may not know your problem well enough to determine which sources you need to sleuth. But eventually, as you prioritize your research, you'll follow some, but not all of your sources to their foundational info. For the most central questions you plan to address in your white paper, it's worth it to dig down to verify the foundations of the conversation. This can help you understand and critically evaluate those later sources. Everything that comes after and mentions these foundational sources gives an interpretation of the primary information. It's analyzed and reanalyzed among many versions and voices of experts. Your foundational information may be new research, it may be data, it could be government documents, public polls, newspapers, personal diaries, even now tweets. It all depends on which piece of the conversation you're sleuthing. And of course, reading primary sources like a court briefing, for example, for the very first time can feel like interpreting Greek. So don't forget, you always have your librarian and your instructor available to help.